Civil war in Sudan. 16 months of clashes between military forces and the militia has torn a nation apart.
A few weeks ago, there were shells, machine guns, and snipers. We had to sleep under the beds.
Tens of thousands have been killed and millions displaced, with many on the brink of famine.
The fighting is very intense in our area. There's no food there. We have nothing to eat.
And as foreign weapons and mercenaries flow in, hope for a peaceful solution to the violence seems elusive. Welcome to PBS News Weekly. I'm Ali Rogan. This week, we bring you rare inside reporting from Sudan from our special correspondent Layla Milana Allen, with support from the Pulitzer Center. Up first, her look at how the conflict began and where prospects for peace stand now.
5 years ago, elated Sudanese, young and old, danced in the streets after countrywide protests brought down Sudan's 30-year dictator and indicted war criminal Omar al-Bashir. Democracy had arrived. But just 2 years later, the Sudanese army and a rehabilitated militia, the Rapid Support Forces, united under Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and took power in what Sudanese civil society calls a coup against the people. Malik Agar is Sudan's vice president and deputy head of the military junta that's ruled the country since 2021. A former insurgent leader, he's been a leading political and military figure for decades. Before the explosion of the conflict last April, RSF leader General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemedti, was vice president. Agar succeeded him after the RSF broke away from Sudan's army and began to fight against it. The war erupted seemingly without warning, taking most Sudanese by surprise in its speed and ferocity. The NewsHour sat down with Vice President Agar to discuss the latest on the fighting and the prospects for peace.
The attacking force was a collateral force, very huge, and they put the Sudan government army into a position of defense. And after 1 year, the Sudanese army managed to change the mood of the war, and now the Sudanese army is on offense. So to fight them, to follow them from area to area, is rather difficult for a conventional army. This is why it's taking long.
Agar has been an outspoken critic of international attempts to mediate the conflict and encourage negotiations with the RSF, saying the only solution is the complete military destruction of the militia.
Any leader in Sudan who can go into negotiations with RSF is committing a political suicide. RSF is an instrument, is a tool for the UAA and others. Hemedti has no control of the forces here. How do you kill people? How do you rape girls and women and everybody and destroy the infrastructure and you want to rule? Then you have no control of these forces.
Multiple foreign governments, including the United Arab Emirates, Russia, Saudi Arabia and Iran, have taken an interest in the conflict, resulting in a steady flow of foreign weapons and mercenaries on both sides. In June, Agar traveled to Russia to meet with President Vladimir Putin. We asked what he hoped to achieve.
Because I'm fighting a war, and when I'm fighting a war, I don't need pens, I need weapons. And who manufactures weapons? And if I have the ability of getting those weapons, if I have the means of getting this one, I will get it.
Attention to the conflict has been muted in the West, but news that Sudan's government had repaired diplomatic relations with Iran and signed a new weapons deal this spring raised alarm. Agar says if the United States is worried about where they get their weapons, it should sell to Sudan itself.
We are not saying here, I'm not confessing here we are buying weapons from Iran, but we are ready to buy weapons from any country.
Human rights groups have documented evidence of weapons being supplied to the RSF by the UAE, Russia and Turkey, among others, smuggled into RSF territory via neighboring Chad. The United States is a leading arms seller to the UAE.
What impact are those foreign weapons having on your ability to fight this war?
Definitely, they have an effect, a great effect, because these are new weapons. They are not used. Sudanese army they never had such weapons. These militia are being supported by the UAE. I mean, let me put it bluntly, by the UAE and others. The UAE has a lot of economical interests in Sudan. Number one of them is gold mining in Sudan. They wanted some sort of agricultural lands in Sudan. They had also an interest of having an area on the Red Sea for their own interests. We believe there is other interests from other countries also. So it is a complex situation.
What do you want the United States to do in terms of taking responsibility for the use of those US-manufactured weapons being used to slaughter innocent civilians here in Sudan?
One thing that the US government can do is, one, to stop supplying the EUA. They know, the Americans, they know that weapons are being used in Sudan. There is no doubt about that because the evidence are there. So then for them also, they have to decide what do they want the war in Sudan to continue, or do they want, as they talk about democracy and human rights, do they want to preserve the human rights of the Sudanese? And you cannot bring democracy on the middle of the guns. And you cannot bring democracy when you are using militias.
So you believe that these efforts on behalf of the United States to try and become involved in peace talks for Sudan are simply political posturing ahead of the election?
Yes, yes, definitely yes. They are just political alibi, and they are not serious about it. When these elections are over, they will change their mind.
US engagement has been patchy. Special Envoy to Sudan Tom Perriello has never visited the country in his role. A planned visit alongside USAID Director Samantha Power was aborted after the US team refused to travel any further inside Sudan than the airport, citing security concerns.
What does that say to you about their seriousness of being involved in peace talks with Sudan?
If you are serious to solve a problem somewhere, why you don't go and meet the president in his country? Why you don't meet us in our country? But this is it's not happening.
Meanwhile, civil political leaders say they've been cut out of the peace talks and plans for Sudan's future.
Is it the intention of the Sudanese armed forces to immediately give back power to a democratically elected leader when the war is over?
Yet they are ready to take the country to elections and hand over power.
And that is what will happen?
That is what's supposed to happen. You win the war first, and then you go for establishment of democracy.
For now, as the war rages on, democracy has been put on the back burner.
The fighting that has devastated Sudan has also triggered the world's largest displacement of people fleeing the violence and unrest. And now the UN is also warning of famine in some areas. In the second of her reports, Layla Milana Allen traveled to cities on the front lines in central and southeastern Sudan, where she met with those caught in the middle.
Ravaged. After a year and a half of war, this is what remains of the Sudanese capital Khartoum's residential suburbs, once home to millions. The bullet-battered streets tell a story of hand-to-hand combat, craters from missiles fired at close range, ripping through walls and rooftops every few yards. A century-old mosque scarred by hails of gunfire. The area's largest bank, incinerated. Life-saving hospitals, gutted.
So the RSF were using this as a base?
Yes, as a base. So
right.
When the army, the staff liberate this place, so the militia bomb it and destroy it.
After months of fighting, the Sudanese army has managed to recapture this area, but danger isn't far. Just across the Nile in Khartoum City, the Rapid Support Forces continue to shell, shoot and raid. Not a single street is unscathed by the violence. The ache of loss echoes through the eerie silence here.
Blocked off from the main cemetery by the constantly moving front lines, civilians have been burying their family members killed in the fighting here in a makeshift cemetery in the grounds of an old football field where kids used to play.
A few former residents wander, shell-shocked, through once familiar alleyways. But one family never left.
Minhon.
Mariam Adam is 75. As the RSF swept through town last spring, their neighbours fled in terror. But when militiamen came to their door, the Adams refused to leave.
We've seen everything that happened here. We saw the lights of weapons shoot across the sky. We heard all the sounds, and we're still here. A shell hit the house, shattering the glass and walls. That was the first shell that hit our home, injuring me here and here.
Mariam's brother was killed, but miraculously, the rest of the family survived. For a year, they lived on almost nothing, sheltering in their stone house as the bombs rained down.
When the area was under the control of the RSF, they cut off the water and electricity. Last fall, we had to drink rainwater because there was no other water.
Schools have been shut since the war began. All 5-year-old Abak wants is to see her friends and teachers. She doesn't know who's still alive.
I love studying. They were teaching me the letter A for apple, B for boy, and C for chicken. I have friends at school, but the teacher left, and the kindergarten closed its doors.
As we embrace, their emaciated bodies tell how these proud elders gave everything they had to the younger family members. There's more food and water here now, but nothing's guaranteed.
This has not exhausted me. I am happy because I am still standing. I am a fighter. We hope to God that Sudan returns to how it was.
Just a few streets away, battles rage on. The emergency room is packed with panicked, injured families. The Ibrahim's home was just hit by an RSF shell.
We went to the mosque, and on our way back, shells started falling on us like rain, on the streets and on the houses, and we were running everywhere.
Al-Khair's brother Tijani believes nothing is being done to protect civilians in this war.
Children, women, and the elderly unarmed. They have nothing to do with the SAF or RSF, nothing to do with politics. Every home has become a grave. Why? Why all this? For democracy? Overseas, they announce democracy and human rights. They speak beautifully while acting despicably. And here we are in Sudan, dying by the weapons they provide while they say no more war.
Even here, they're not safe. The hospital has been hit 5 times already in as many months. Targeting hospitals in a conflict is a war crime. All of Omdurman's hospitals have been hit multiple times by shelling and small arms fire throughout the course of the war. Most of them aren't functioning anymore. Here at Al-Now Hospital, the only surgical hospital still working. Every time there's a strike, they patch up the damage and carry on. 4 days after the news hour left, Al-Now was hit again. Omdurman's largest private hospital already lies in ruins. The Al-Bulut Children's Hospital has only just managed to reopen after being shelled last month. Here, overstretched doctors work to save young lives under the constant threat of attack.
I can't even find words to describe this. Hospitals are some places where people come to find sanctuary. I myself have been a victim of a stray bullet 2 months ago. This was while working.
Dr. Musaddal specializes in infant malnutrition, a brutal side effect of this war, which is devastating Sudan's children. Mugahed is just 10 months old. He has acute malnutrition.
A lot of new admissions, a lot of cases in under the age of 6 months. There are some cases coming from RSF controlled areas now, which come in a very bad shape. Severe cases of severe acute malnutrition.
Mugahed's little body can't cope. His lungs are failing. He weighs just half what he should at this age.
It's heartbreaking. Truly, it's heartbreaking.
The hospital sees more than 100 cases like this each month. Families like Mugahed's are trapped behind fluid front lines with little access to food and water. Undernourished mothers can't produce the breast milk their babies need. Risking the journey to get them here is the only chance to save them, but they don't always make it. 9-month-old Ukran, named for another bitter war of survival, has had so little to eat in her early life that her organs are failing.
We fled here. Most of us walked on foot. It was very tough. Some people couldn't walk and others couldn't find food. We left everything behind, even my children's birth certificates.
Zakia's husband was killed in a missile attack. If Ukran survives, Zakia must now raise her and her 3 other children alone, with no home and no breadwinner. The level of need across the country is staggering. With little government or international aid, Sudanese communities are rallying to provide. Each evening, these displaced women in Omdurman gather to bake sorghum bread, much cheaper than wheat. The next morning, eager lines down the block to collect rations of bread, lentils, rice and broad beans. all paid for by donations from locals and Sudan's diaspora. This will be the only meal many of these families eat today. If nothing is done, by fall, millions of people will be starving to death. Gaddarif's rolling green hills and idyllic pastoral scenes belie the growing threat. This region is Sudan's breadbasket. But the RSF has already captured the neighboring agricultural states. Home to Sudan's largest grain reserve, stockpiling thousands of tons of food, Gaddarif's farmers are terrified that they're next.
Yes, people are talking, saying that the RSF are coming. They even tell me not to plant, asking, why are you planting? The RSF will take all the crops, they won't leave anything, and people will starve and die.
RSF forces are closing in on Gaddarif in a pincer movement. An RSF victory here would be nothing short of catastrophic for the country's dwindling food supply. As hundreds of thousands of the elderly, the injured, the desperate mothers and their weary children search in vain for a safe place to wait out this war and enough food to survive it, international leaders meet, promising to find solutions. Few here believe that help is coming.
In total, 11 million people have been forced from their homes in Sudan. Up to 150,000 people are feared dead, and millions more face unimaginable trauma. Layla Malana Allen follows some of the families desperately searching for sanctuary.
A perilous journey, inching along the front line with only the occasional cover of the mountains. As we're led through the rough sands by an armed escort of Sudanese soldiers, black plumes of smoke from fresh shelling rise through the air. But we're not going to the battle zone. We're here to meet Sudanese families trying to outrun the conflict. To get out, they have to make it through this treacherous strip alone.
This is the northernmost point of Omdurman, where displaced people arrive having escaped from frontline and RSF-held territory. We're wearing protective equipment because in recent days, the RSF has been shelling this area. Even as people make it here after their dangerous journey, they're still not safe yet.
An exhausted mother who's made it here with her baby and toddler.
The fighting is very intense in our area. There's no food there. We have nothing to eat.
She's at the very end of her strength. Her eyes glazed, she sits, staring. A brief moment of rest before they have to move on again.
We're sick, hungry, and we have small children. We are so tired of this war. We won't survive. Living like this is so very hard.
All these families arrived just this morning. They are a few of the millions of civilians traversing the country, forced from their homes by this bloody war. If they're lucky, they can afford a seat in a minibus or a donkey cart. But for most, it's an arduous journey on foot, covering hundreds of miles in the baking heat. They're running from the greatest of horrors, looting, killing, rape, at the hands of Rapid Support Forces militiamen. At this construction site in Gaddarif, the air is thick with the trauma of what they've endured.
There are thousands of people staying in this makeshift reception centre. They're practically in the open air, completely exposed to the heat of the day and the wind at night. They're hoping for a spot in an official displacement camp, but with so many people arriving, there just isn't space. And many of them have fled from other displacement camps that have now been overrun by the RSF.
In the past few weeks, the RSF's latest offensive has swept through the southern state of Sennar, sending its residents running for their lives. For most here, it's far from the first time they've had to flee. This is the 5th time Salma's family has been displaced by this war. 4 of her 6 kids are younger than 5. The journey was long and rough, sleeping on a blanket on the roadside each night, fending off snakes and scorpions.
10 days on the road from place to place until we got here. When they said they were hungry, I told them we're almost there. When they said they were too tired, I told them we're almost there. I would point and promise them, look, your father will be there when we arrive.
But their father was not at the end of the long road. He stayed behind to earn money for his family when they first fled. Salma hasn't heard from him since. The attacks happen so fast, family members are often separated. When the RSF descended on their first displacement shelter, her neighbor was out trying to find work. So Salma grabbed the woman's teenage daughters, along with her own kids, and ran.
I couldn't leave them behind. Until now, there's no news about their mother, not even a phone call.
With no work to be had, they survive on the kindness of others. Volunteers distribute 1 meal a day to the families. And locals from the city bring what they have to share. But now, fears of an attack on Gedaref are growing. Salma doesn't know if she has the strength to run again.
A few weeks ago, there were shells, machine guns, and snipers. We had to sleep under the beds. If the RSF comes here, I am not going anywhere. I will die here. I can't bear to be displaced yet again.
With nowhere to house the onslaught of people, schools, closed since the beginning of the war, have become shelters. At this girls' school, students were clamoring to continue classes, but didn't want to make the temporary residents homeless. So the principal found a compromise. The girls arrive at the crack of dawn and take their lessons in the garden. They've even made space for an extra 250 displaced pupils. Inside the school buildings, families living in limbo. Amuna's been here 6 months with her 4 toddlers. At night, up to 200 people pack these 2 small rooms.
So this is where you've been living?
Yeah, this is a place where I live with my family.
Al-Noor's family are staying in the classroom next door. He says they've seen little international support.
They have forgotten us because we didn't see them on the ground usually. We see people in Syria, we see people in Ukraine and something like, but I think that this is Africa or something like this. They let us down. Now we have 2 months, we didn't receive anything, especially
You
food.
haven't received any aid in 2 months?
2 months.
And how are you feeling about the future for your children, for Sudan?
Yes, the future of my children right now, I see it is very dark and it is very sorrowful. We have to believe in we are a one nation and to look for the country, yes, as a home for us all.
The recently opened displacement camp nearby can't even begin to host this number of people. Aid agencies on the ground say without more funding and access to the areas hit hardest, there's little more they can do. At schools across the country, similar scenes. These families have just fled Tuti, a tiny island in the center of Khartoum state. Both Mohammed and his wife have diabetes. It was time to go, but only if they could afford the RSF's hefty exit bribes. It cost him nearly $1,000 to get his small family out. Life savings he was lucky to have, unlike many others. No one knows what the future holds now, and at night, the children go back to Tuti.
The children are badly affected by the war. They know the difference between the sounds of bullets and shells. They're psychologically unstable and scared. All they talk about is the militias, even in their games.
Many are fleeing evils even darker than bombs and hunger. Maha, whose name we've changed to protect her, was out running errands in her hometown of Omdurman when a gunfight broke out. In seconds, her husband was dead, and the RSF had kidnapped her. For 6 months, she was held captive, subjected to horrifying abuse.
There was beating, sexual assault, and death. Everything was done to us.
Finally, they gave her a choice. Work for the RSF, or we will kill your children.
That's where the torture and training began. They trained us girls. My role was to be a spy to gather information for them. Because my children were in their hands, I had no choice but to work with them.
Eventually, she was caught. Now, she spends her days in a protection center in the army zone, dreaming helplessly of her 3 young kids.
Until now, I don't know if my children are alive or dead.
I tell Maha we should stop if it's too much. No, she insists. People need to know what's happening.
Many other people have experienced similar things. I am not the first girl, nor will I be the last. Some girls were raped in front of their parents. All Sudanese have been psychologically damaged by the RSF. We live in fear.
With the war still raging, there's little space for healing. Escape, survive, escape, survive. A nightmarish cycle playing out on repeat for Sudanese families who never know if their next stop will be their safe place or their last. The distances displaced Sudanese families have to cover to escape the fighting are vast, and they're often taking the long way around the mountains to try and avoid the shifting front lines. Everyone we speak to is telling us that when the RSF assaults a new town or village, they attack so fast and so brutally that civilians have to drop everything and run. Even those who make it as far as Port Sudan, the military capital on the Red Sea, are little better off. Children arrive in dire condition on the outskirts of the city. Even those who look relatively healthy turn out to have malnutrition. And even for those with some cash, most food is unaffordable now. The price of meat has risen by 6 times in the past 2 months. Homeless, penniless, constantly trying to outrun the next attack. This conflict, which has devastated the lives of millions of Sudanese, shows little sign of slowing on its path of destruction. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Layla Malana Allen in Port Sudan.
That's it for this week's episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.